Hey everyone, welcome for joining today. I see people are coming in. Just give a few seconds for everything to load for everyone. Thanks for joining today, our 45 minutes speed session on mastering ChatGPT. I was just saying to a few people right before we started that ChatGPT is increasing its capabilities so quickly, it's really hard to keep up. And so that's really what I'm going to try and do today. And as promised, I will do that within about 45 minutes or so. This is a webinar. Usually I just do Zoom calls, but we had too many people sign up, around 400 for this session. So this is a webinar style event, which means that I don't have a chat, so I cannot chat with you guys. But if you have any questions along the way, you can hit the Q&A button and just type in your question there, and I'll save them up until the end so that we both get through the material in the promised 45 minutes and we still have some time for questions and answers if you want to stick around. Okay, so just a little bit about myself. Dan, I've been coaching people on AI for about 2 years now, mostly executives, mostly leaders at companies like Google, Microsoft, McKinsey, L'Oreal, Siemens, GSK, and so forth. Also featured in a bunch of media, spoken at conferences, and then I write the Lead with AI newsletter, which comes out weekly to about 30,000 subscribers, including most of you now. And are actually gearing 25,000 subscribers, followers on LinkedIn, where I'm a top voice. But all that aside, that's not really important. The most important thing is that we're going to get into ChatGPT and how to master all of the features so that you can get a lot more out of this amazing tool than potentially you're already getting out of it. And I will answer the most asked question upfront, which is that yes, I will send you the slides and the recording of this session right after the webinar. Just two quick commercial messages. We have two great products for people who really want to go into AI, who maybe feel that they're behind or just scratching the surface, and have a sense that they can get a lot more out of it if they would just have someone to kind of guide them. So first of all, we have a really great boot camp. We do these every 6 to 8 weeks or so. The next one is starting on August 22nd. And this is where we take non-technical leaders and certify them as AI leaders with a team of at least 5 AI assistants that we build over the course of 3 weeks together. And you can register for that one at flexos.work/lead with AI. We'll also send you an email following with the slides, and then you have all of the links as well. And the second thing is that we have an amazing community, probably including some of you, over 350 senior leaders at some of the leading companies, but also solopreneurs, fractionals, consultants, AI startup founders, corporate VPs, all people that are figuring out, how does AI really work? How do I get the most out of it? How do I implement it in my work and in my business? And you can join that one if you already feel like you've covered all the basics. You don't need the bootcamp. You can join that one. It's just $29 a month, and the URL is here on the screen, which again, we'll send to you as well. So with the commercials out of the way, let's dive into the topic of today, which is ChatGPT, this amazing platform, which, as I saw earlier last week, now registers over 2.5 billion prompts per day, 2.5 billion prompts per day for a tool that didn't exist just 3 years ago, from over at least 500 million users. So it's really incredible how much people are using ChatGPT, but at the same time also how much I still see people using really only, and I'm going to be generous saying 10%, really only using a fraction of all the things that ChatGPT can do. If you imagine that ChatGPT has been trained on all the human knowledge in the world, it knows and can do a lot, especially with all the features they've built now. But people are, you're just not getting out of it what they could get out of it. And again, that's what we're going to address today. So by the end of the session, I will have taken you through about 20 features of ChatGPT, which you can then start to implement. And I've kind of divided them in a couple of key buckets. The first one is prompt engineering, because without a good prompt, you really don't get most out of ChatGPT. And this also applies to other AI platforms like Gemini and Copilot. The second one is a set of productivity tools that ChatGPT now offers, including web search, tasks, projects, deep research, and ChatGPT Record. Creative features, ChatGPT Canvas and 4o images. And then a bunch of assistants. So we'll talk about custom GPTs, advanced voice mode, including screen share and video share, and then the new ChatGPT agent. It's marked here in yellow because I'll spend actually a little bit more time on that and give you a live demo because this was only launched last week, and I think another incredible upgrade to ChatGPT. Then advanced models, I also share a bit more time on O3, the reasoning model. There's a bunch of other models as well. And then personalization. So no one wants to get the same answer that other people get. You want to use ChatGPT really as a very personalized tool. And so that's where these kind of essential features come in. Mm, okay. And then we only have 45 minutes, maybe plus some Q&A. So if you are kind of feeling that some of the features that I'm highlighting, you haven't even used them yet, or you're still trying to get the most out of them, we have a very detailed ChatGPT course. It's, again, not really something we make, clearly not like something that we monetize heavily, but just something that we put together for the community. And if you're not in the community yet, then you can access it. It's normally $99. We're going to be slashing that to, I think, actually not 49, but 29 if you sign up through the link on the screen. And that's really where we spend a lot more time on each individual feature because asynchronously we have that time. Now, let's use the time today correctly, starting with the first set of features that I think is really important, which is the prompt engineering. So before we go into anything on the platform itself, generally, if you have a sense for how AI works, you know that the better your prompt, the better your input, the better the output. So we start with a framework we call Kodu super prompting. And the idea really here is, and this is very natural for most senior leaders that I coach, is that good prompting is basically good delegation. If you can explain in detail what good work looks like for any kind of assignment that you have for AI, just like with a human, you typically get a lot better outputs. In other words, if you put garbage in, meaning a really bad or basic prompt in, you typically get pretty bad results as well. And I would say even sometimes weeks or months into coaching trajectories, we still go back to, yeah, but how was that prompt? And this goes even for advanced features and even into other platforms. The prompt is still the most important thing. So learning how to prompt is really important. So we use a framework called Kodu super prompting, which is basically just to say we want to give as much context as possible to ChatGPT. Also applies to other AI platforms where we define the character. So who is ChatGPT supposed to be today? The objective, the do's and don'ts, and then also the outputs that we're looking for. And by providing all of that, we already get a lot better quality responses. So when we're talking about 10xing your output from ChatGPT, honestly, maybe 80% of that 10% or 10x you can get here from just writing better prompts. And this is sort of a lifelong practice of getting better and better at prompting. Just like learning how to lead and learning how to delegate is something that you also craft and hone over time. Now, that's definitely not where it starts. There's a whole set of advanced prompt engineering techniques that we go into when we have more time in either the bootcamp or in the asynchronous course. One of them I wanted to highlight today, which is chain of thought prompting. So again, I'll send you the slides. You can look into the detailed links. Chain of thought prompting is basically saying to AI, and this works even for reasoning models, which we'll get into in a little bit, is to say to AI, please break down your work step by step. By saying to AI that they have to take an assignment one step at a time, they actually, and researchers have shown this, actually produce better results. Chain of thought prompting, all you have to do is add to your prompt, please take it step by step, or break down your work step by step, or take it one step at a time. By adding that, you typically get a lot better responses. And then the final tip that I give everyone is to build up your own prompt library. If you create a library of all of the prompts that are working really well for you, you don't lose out over time because maybe you forget a prompt, you forget like what created really good results for you. So building up your own prompt library is also super helpful. And both the full bootcamp and the ChatGPT course, they include this library template where you can build your own prompt library. But again, you could just start a Google Sheet or an Excel sheet or a Notion and just start adding somewhere in some place, like start logging all of your best prompts. So I start there because prompting is really where you get most of the value. Better prompts is better output. Now, again, that's not to say that we are in the ChatGPT of 2021, right? We have a lot of other features that ChatGPT now offers that we didn't have 2 years ago when prompting was very important. So I want to show some of those to you as well. Some may be very familiar and you're like, yeah, I already use that every day. Some may be completely new to you. Some may be not available to you because of the plan that you're on. But I'm just going to highlight all of the features so that at least you have an awareness of what's possible on ChatGPT. The first one being ChatGPT web search. I don't know if you know it or not, but ChatGPT and other AI platforms, they only get trained kind of incidentally because it takes a lot of time for training, for model training to be done. So for example, for ChatGPT, the latest training data, so the latest data it has absorbed is June 2024, is almost, no, is over a year ago now. So ChatGPT, without referencing the internet, doesn't know that Trump is elected or that the Prime Minister of UK is elected, doesn't know about the Olympics, doesn't know that those astronauts finally have come back to Earth, that there has been a coup in Korea. All of the things that have happened since June 2024, ChatGPT doesn't know. So that's why ChatGPT offers something called ChatGPT Live Web Search. You can click the little search box. You see it here on the screen, the little icon, either on the desktop app, on the web app, or on the mobile app. And then it will actually go out and find information for you online. Because again, without that, it doesn't know anything after June 2024. And this is how you can get much more accurate and current information. This is really important to know because again, if you would just be relying on the training data, you may get responses that are not correct. And one perfect way to show that is by asking ChatGPT about new ChatGPT features, because usually it doesn't know that because it's not in its training data. At the same time, you can also sometimes feel like I don't want to get a summary of whatever the top 3 blog posts on a topic are saying, because that's what web search does. It does the search for you, reads those blogs, gives you the answer back, or news items or websites. So sometimes you actually want to explicitly say, I don't want you to use web search. I want you to rely on your training data, which is hundreds and hundreds of years of human knowledge, right? So toggling that search feature either on or off, you can either say it or use the button, can yield very different results. Now, another layer on that is something called ChatGPT Task, which is only from the last 6 months or so. And with ChatGPT Task, you can basically set those kind of assignments, like go out and do research for me. You can set them on a schedule. So you could say, for example, here in my prompt, every Friday at 3 p.m., I want you to kind of like do some research on this topic or send me a reminder of something and then send it to me so that I have that information. So a lot of people have set this up, for example, if you're in sales, to do client or industry research. When you're in content, maybe you want to do some news alerts on a particular topic. Maybe you want to monitor your brand or monitor a competitor. All of that you can do on ChatGPT tasks simply by prompting it every X day at X hour, do the following thing. It will then add it to your tasks. You can go into your settings and remove particular tasks if you don't want them to be running anymore. And you will get a notification every single time that a task has run. And this works even on the free plan. Now, this and other conversations you're having with ChatGPT are creating a lot of chats. So you have a lot of chats with ChatGPT, which becomes very unorganized. And that's why ChatGPT launched something called ChatGPT Project. So you have this on the Plus plan and above. This means that you can start grouping groups of chats together under a particular or in a particular folder. So you could say, for example, I'm going to put everything for my newsletter writing. That's the tutorial that we have in the course, newsletter writing, social media content, competitive research, sales emails. I'm going to put all of that in a folder because not only can I now find those things more easily, you can also add custom instructions and knowledge, which I'll talk about a little bit more detail when we go to GPTs, custom GPTs. You can add that to your project so that every time you start a chat, you're almost like talking to the head of a department, which already has been pre-trained on particular things on that project. And ChatGPT recently launched an update that now it's actually remembering specifically the chats from that project, kind of like as preferred knowledge over the general knowledge when you're involving ChatGPT projects. So that means if you're writing a new newsletter, it remembers the last 10 or 20 issues, including the tone and generally like what you like to see in those newsletters. So that really helps on getting better quality responses. Okay, that's ChatGPT projects. I told you we're going to go through 20 features, so it's quite a lot. But here we go to ChatGPT Deep Research. This was launched earlier this year. Again, I'm just going to say it again and again. There's so much value in ChatGPT, and most people are just scratching the surface. This is just another example of an amazing feature that I don't really see people using all that much. You may be, but a lot of people are not familiar with this. They're not really using it. What ChatGPT Deep Research does, and it's kind of like an agentic tool, and agentic just means that you're not just giving the AI instructions and it executes it exactly how you said it, but you're giving it an objective and it autonomously understands how to best achieve that objective. In this case, deep research, which you can just find by clicking research on the mobile app or clicking the deep research option on your website or on your desktop app. Deep research will be acting as it's like a bot trained specifically, or an agent trained specifically on being a research analyst. So you can give it any topic and it will go out and do really detailed research. It can take up to 100 different sources, then interpret all those sources and create a report that can be tens of pages, basically making it so that you're an expert on every single topic. So if you're applying for a job in a new industry, or you want to get to know a customer's industry, or maybe the background of a company, or you're researching a person or any kind of topic, the first thing you want to do is set up a deep research. It takes 20 or 30 minutes. You get back a really, really detailed report. And then pro tip, you can take that report, which can be 20, 30 pages, put it in a tool like NotebookLM, create a podcast out of it, or start a new conversation with ChatGPT based on all the data it has just collected. And for example, get it to quiz you about it, or ask follow-up questions, or brainstorm on how to apply it. We'll talk about brainstorming in a little bit. That's ChatGPT Deep Research. Again, one of those things that you got to be using it like at least once a week to get full value out of ChatGPT. And then the last one of the productivity tools is called ChatGPT Record. If you've been using AI note takers, this should be quite familiar. Unfortunately, it's only available on the team plan. So if you have the team plan, and specifically you have the app on the Mac, so the desktop app on Mac, you can now open up in any meeting, you can open up ChatGPT, the app, you can hit on record. You see it here on the top left side. You can hit on record and it will basically absorb the entire meeting. Then when you're done, you can send it to ChatGPT, and what it will do is basically generate a transcript. And then you see here on the right-hand side, it will create a canvas, which is another ChatGPT feature that I'll talk about, a canvas with a summary of the meeting. And then you can use that to ask follow-up questions, to brainstorm, to edit certain elements of it. You can see action items, you can assign those, you can collaborate on those, basically directly in ChatGPT. And now it has also loaded the entire conversation into its memory, so you get a lot more personalized data now in your ChatGPT. So this is just a way to train your AI brain even further. Hopefully it's going to roll out to other plans and to other apps as well, but right now only on the team plan and with the Mac desktop app. So a lot of productivity features on ChatGPT. I think we could just stop there, and unless you're pretty advanced on ChatGPT, you would have already 10x your output of ChatGPT, because just using deep research and record and prompting better, that's already a ton of value. But we're going to move on. So we're going to go to the creative tools. We have here Canvas and 4o Images. So Canvas is really amazing. I think it's one of my favorite features of ChatGPT. It's basically like an interactive text editor that you can use for writing or coding, where you can select any part of the document that you're editing and collaborate with ChatGPT on it. There are specific buttons in Canvas where you can say, shorten this text, expand this text, summarize it, turn it into bullet points, make the text easier to understand, make it more complex, more academic. And you can ask all kinds of follow-up questions. So you can say, here I selected the headline, and you can say, write me a better headline, or, based on the text below. So it's kind of like you're talking to ChatGPT about a text, but instead of toggling between your Word or your docs and ChatGPT, you're doing it directly in the interface. And you can just ask ChatGPT to open a canvas and start editing. Or also, if you have any ChatGPT response, you can click on the button below that response and open up the canvas automatically, so that you don't just have like a text response. You basically have an interactive document that you can now work on. So that's ChatGPT Canvas. Another amazing creative feature is 4o Images. So previously, if you've generated images with ChatGPT earlier this year, it would have gone through an image model called DALL-E, and it was terrible, right? There would be very illegible text, maybe figures with 6 or 7 fingers, terrible, terrible, terrible visuals. Now you can actually prompt an image directly in ChatGPT and it will go through its multimodal model. We talk about multimodal in the course, but a multimodal model and it creates images right there in ChatGPT, so you don't need to rely on an external image generator. Additionally, what you can do is you can basically select any part of this image, like brush over it, and reprompt only that part of the image. So in this case, I created an image for a conference in Amsterdam, but the buildings that I see here don't look very Dutch. So I can basically select one of these buildings, brush over it on the website, and then say, oh, I just want to turn this building into something else, and it will do that. So you can generate the images directly in ChatGPT. Fun fact, this image you saw earlier, including the text under that image, was generated by ChatGPT 4.0. There you go. Okay, now we go to AI assistants. So all of these features so far, we talked about prompting, we talked about productivity features, creative features, all of those features so far are all kind of standardized features on ChatGPT. I want to talk about the part where I think AI and ChatGPT in specific is the most valuable, and that's when you really tailor it to your needs, when it really becomes your AI. And we do it in three ways. The first one is custom GPTs. The second one is advanced voice. And the final one is the new one, ChatGPT agent, which we'll spend a bit more time on. Now, generally, I kind of see all of the kind of assistants and automations and agents kind of as better versions of a really good prompt where they become more complex, but as they become more complex, they're more impactful. Now, we will not really go into automations and agents per se today, but assistants for sure. An assistance basically would be something where you have a customized version of ChatGPT that is hyper trained on your particular needs. So in this case, we have a custom GPT. So it's kind of like a mini app built on the general ChatGPT. We have created it for our cohort 8. So this was like the 8th cohort of the bootcamp that we run. And at the end of the bootcamp, people get a PDF with about 140 pages of all the content that we went through over the course. So, you know, if I can squeeze a lot of features into 45 minutes, I can also squeeze a lot of content into just 3 weeks of training. So that PDF has all of the content from those 3 weeks, and we basically give it to people to have kind of everything in one place. But now that we have AI, what we basically can do and what we've done is to take that ebook, to take that 140-page PDF, upload it to AI and create a mini app, which is now a personal AI coach. So instead of just browsing through the PDF, browsing through the ebook, you can actually ask your question to this AI, and the AI knows everything that's in the ebook, but it can give you personalized information. So for example, you could say, hey, in the course, I learned something about creating a GPT, right? To make it very meta. What were the instructions specifically? But then that's from the knowledge I uploaded. But then because AI knows everything, ChatGPT knows everything, you could say, yeah, I tried that, but for me it didn't work, or I have this specific question, or can you give me some ideas for what GPTs I should create? And because ChatGPT has all that information as well, it can then make it much more personalized. So you're really combining the best of the overall ChatGPT with the custom kind of personalized GPT. And the only thing, and by the way, to create GPTs, you need Plus plan or above, but I would almost say, and we have a detailed module on different plans in the course, but I would almost say, like, if you're using GPT more than once a year, you need the Plus anyway. But in the Plus, you can create a GPT. The only thing you really need is a super good prompt. So I always say, if you fine tune the prompt to the level where you say, every time I use that prompt, I get so much value, you want to move it from your prompt library into a GPT. This means every single time you invoke that GPT, which you can do by just typing the @ sign and then the name of that GPT. So in this case, I could just type @lead with AI cohort 8, and the GPT would know everything that I uploaded into it. So the prompt, and then you can additionally add some knowledge, in this case, the ebook, and that then becomes your personalized AI assistant. We recently did for the community, we did a fantastic, I was really impressed by this, fantastic session on role playing your customers with custom GPTs with Mike Taylor, who is the founder of Ask Rally. And he basically showed how just through a simple GPT, you can set these up in like 5 minutes. Through a simple GPT, you could basically replicate a focus group with your customers. So you could upload all of your customer profiles, kind of like their motivations and who they are, like a typical customer persona. And now every single time you're thinking about launching a new product, or you have a marketing message or an asset that you want to test, you send it to that GPT and you get responses back spoken by your customers. And again, you can do that. Well, you need a plus plan, but you can do it completely for free. It takes like 5 to 10 minutes. Really, really amazing. This session, by the way, is in the app if you're a member. So that's custom GPT. So everyone should create at least like 3, 4, 5 of these custom GPTs, because you will have a couple of things that you keep going back to AI for. And there you really want to create your custom GPT so that you kind of skip the step of prompting, uploading knowledge, etc., because it's already captured in the GPT. The second AI assistant is advanced voice. So we all kind of now are starting to feel familiar with AI kind of as a army of very intelligent and very well-willing interns working 24/7. But where I see the biggest transformation is when people start tapping AI to be a senior advisor, a coach, right? So think about maybe a life coach, an executive coach, right? Maybe even like a fit coach, right? For all of those things, you can do that with ChatGPT. Of course, you can do it in chat, but it starts to become much more intuitive when you basically just pick up the phone and use advanced voice mode. So when you're in ChatGPT, even on the free plan, you can click on the audio icon in a new chat, and this will start ChatGPT advanced voice mode, which now is just as quick as talking to a human. They've reduced the time between you sending a message and getting a message back. So it really starts to feel like you're speaking to someone, but this someone just happens to be the smartest person in the world because they literally know everything. All the human knowledge has been downloaded into ChatGPT. So ChatGPT Advanced Voice is just super valuable, right? Start using it as a senior advisor, as a business coach, as a thought partner, brainstorming sessions. You're going somewhere, you're on the way, you have 20 minutes. Hey, I'm thinking about this, I'm dealing with this, I need to solve this. Imagine that you are, right? Imagine that you are Adam Grant, the organizational psychologist. Imagine that you are Chris Voss, the negotiation expert, right? Here's my situation. How would you solve it? And you have a very interactive discussion. Now, the two layers on that is that, first of all, you can do screen share. So when you're on the mobile phone, you can, or on the tablet, you can actually screen share. So you can actually show what's on your screen. So in this case, they're doing math homework together as a demo from OpenAI. But you could also, for example, I saw an example of a founder showing their website and basically browsing through their website, asking ChatGPT for ideas on how to improve, maybe as a digital strategist or as an SEO advisor, right? So you can screen share and then ChatGPT can see everything that's on your screen. You can also video share. So you can also show everything that's around you, pinpoint something and say, hey, what is that I'm looking at? Or here's something that we're building, give me some advice. People are using this for DIY projects. Hey, here's something I'm working on. How would I approach it? What should I do now? And basically keep the feed open, keep asking questions, right? So you can not only talk through ChatGPT through voice, you can also let it see everything that you see on your screen, and you can even video share. So that really makes it like a very interactive assistant, not only for junior tasks, but also for more senior tasks. Okay. So actually everything so far has been, at least 2 months old. So in ChatGPT world, we could say that's kind of old news. Now let's move to something that's definitely a lot newer, which is ChatGPT Agent. So just got launched last week. ChatGPT Agent is basically coming together of two groups within OpenAI, the maker of ChatGPT. It's the Operator team. Operator was basically a tool that they built to browse websites on your behalf, where it couldn't do it through just reading the data. It actually has to go on the website as if it is a human. And on the other side, the deep research team, deep research you saw earlier, they brought those together and they're basically saying there's now one new kind of entity, and that is ChatGPT Agent. And ChatGPT Agent can do a couple of things. It can basically act on your behalf. So you're not just talking to ChatGPT and it getting to react. It's really about getting it to act. So you can basically assign it something to do, and then it will go and do it. So on the right-hand side here, I said, go onto our website and scrape all the articles on this and this topic, and then turn it into some kind of like advice and put it into a PowerPoint, right? That kind of project you could give to agent and it would autonomously navigate all of the steps. It does so by basically opening up a virtual computer. So just imagine that it's opening a new laptop and it's a clean install and it starts doing the work for you, and it can browse websites, it can click on links, it can fill out forms, very helpful. And it can also ask you, for example, hey, you're asking me to retrieve some data from the HBR website. Well, it needs a password after one free article. Can you log in for me? And then it can actually go into that website. It could log into your CMS and update records. Anything that you currently do on the computer, ChatGPT agent can do it. It's very expensive to run. So on Plus, you get 40 prompts, and that doesn't mean like 40 conversations back and forth. That means like 40 times that you're sending something to agents, all the way up to 400 prompts on ChatGPT Pro. You can actually run out pretty quickly. Now, the question always when they launch a new feature like that, how am I actually going to use it? I released this one last Thursday. You can find it on the website. It will be linked in this presentation that we send you as well. 50 use cases for business leaders. A couple of ones that I really liked. Someone had sent agents to log into their MS Teams on their behalf, browse through all of their messages, and basically answer questions summarizing what's important to me. Someone else did research and had ChatGPT create an entire slide deck. It can do that too. It can create PowerPoints. It can create Excel sheets. Had them create an entire slide deck. Someone else created a blog post with agents. So research, writing the post, and then actually logging into WordPress and publishing the post, right? These are things that you definitely couldn't do with ChatGPT a couple of weeks ago, unless you had Operator on the Pro plan. So this is now really becoming an AI that doesn't just give you answers, create content, but it can go out and perform actions for you, right? Like logging into WordPress, publishing a post. Another great example for those of you in HR or hiring managers, someone gave it a JD of a job and said, log into my LinkedIn for me and look at different profiles of candidate and see who I should reach out to, and then summarize that in a sheet. And all of these are on in this article on the website. And the final one that I loved was also, again, very meta, told AI to create a course about AI end to end. So it did the research, it created the course, it wrote the PowerPoint, the presentation, but also different assets like a workbook. All of that done fully end to end with AI. Now, it's definitely not perfect. It's definitely kind of like a very early proof of concept, I would say, but there's something there. And I think the easiest way to kind of show how crazy it is just to kind of show it. So I'll here minimize the screen. Let me see if you can still see it. Yeah, perfect. So here we have ChatGPT. When you're in ChatGPT, and again, this should work on Plus and above, few markets are still restricted, like EU. So you may have to either have a VPN or have some patience. But when you have this feature available to you, you can click in ChatGPT, you can click here on Tools, and you click here on Agent, and now you can just prompt the agent. So in this case, I have a prompt. This tutorial, by the way, is on our site, and I will send it to you after the session. But I'm basically asking it to do competitive research on my behalf. So look at how top consulting firms design and position their newsletters, McKinsey, Deloitte, BCG. Give me a couple of like different insights, and then compare it to how we do our newsletter. In this case, I can select some sources, more on that later. In this case, I'm going to just do web search, but if you have proprietary data, you can include items that are on your Google Drive or on your SharePoint, on your Box. Maybe you can pull items from HubSpot. I'll talk about connectors a little bit later. And basically, now that I've given this prompt, I can click here on send. You see that it's loading. It's setting up that desktop that I mentioned. It's giving me kind of confirmation of, okay, this is what I'm going to be doing for you. And here you can see it opening up kind of like a virtual browser. And off it goes navigating the internet for you. So you see here in real time what it is doing. It's sort of like a prettified UI, but you see here in real time what it's doing. In this case, it's opening a page not found, very helpful. So it's going through like all of its research. This can take, again, like 30 minutes to an hour, depending on the task. Anytime here, you can interject. So you say, look, oh, it's going to McKinsey. I don't want to include McKinsey at all. You could stop it. You could take over control, for example. So here you can click here on the three dots. You can click here on take over browser. When you take over the browser, basically it will stop its actions and you can interfere and tell it what to do, or do something on its behalf, for example, logging into a website. You can tell it to stop completely. You can also here see all of the activity. So you just see in just the couple of minutes it's been going, like all of the work it has done so far. Now, obviously, this is a task that can take quite long. As you can see, it's taking a lot of actions. So let me just kind of fast forward here. I ran that same prompt. So exact same prompt. It said, okay, I understand. Any previous task with ChatGPT agent, you can actually open up the chat and you see a full replay. In this case, it worked for 42 minutes. It caught 133 sources to create this competitive review. You can replay that full thing. So what you just saw live, you can actually get a full replay of it. And here you can see that, okay, it's opening up the McKinsey website. It's getting a cookie blocker. So it basically clicked out of that. It's navigating the website. You basically see it do all the work. If we fast forward through that entire 42 minute time frame, then you see towards the end, it has loaded all of the data. It's now creating the charts. It's creating the visuals. It's doing the analysis. And then finally here, it is creating the slide deck with the information that I requested. And if I switch slides here one more time, just making sure you can see it. Yeah. Then this is the final slideshow that ChatGPT agent produced for me with one slide for each competitor. It even generated some visuals. It showed what we are doing and then a table to contrast and compare. So this is an actual tutorial. We'll send it to you after the session. Create a competitive brief deck with ChatGPT agent. So if you're on the Plus plan and in the right country, you can do this like right after the session. Really, really interesting just to see again how this works, and you can tailor that prompt to your particular situation so that it really works for you. Okay, rounding out the two key things I want to show you is the O3 reasoning model and connectors. So first of all, on models. So this is another area where, just like with prompting, I see a lot of people not getting the full value from ChatGPT because they're stuck on the general 4.0 model. Now, even OpenAI says, you can see it here in the image, GPT 4.0 is great for most tasks, but that's not to say that there aren't better models specifically tailored to particular tasks. So I kind of said here on the slide, it's kind of like cars, right? Every car will get you hopefully to your destination, but some are faster, some are slower, built for tougher terrain, some are cheaper, right? There are still differences in the cars that you can choose. And the same thing goes for these AI models. So actually choosing the right model can significantly enhance and change the results that you get. And even on the free plan, you have choice of some models, but from Plus plan and above, you really can choose between quite a few plans. Now, there are a lot of plans we cannot go into today because we only have a few minutes left. But the ones that I really want to highlight are 4.1, 4.5, and O3. 4.1 is really good when you want to, well, if you're a coder, you're basically kind of destined to use 4.1. But 4.1 is really good when you want the AI to read something very diligently. So I use that for like a lot of like document analysis, for example. 4.5 is really good for creative writing, has a higher EQ. And then O3. So O3 requires a little bit more explanation. O3 is part of a family of models called reasoning models. If you know Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, this is basically your system two. So whereas AI normally gives you a reply immediately, this is basically where AI applies chain of thought, which we talked about before, COT, before it responds. So basically, it will really think through its reply. It will take the work step by step and is therefore a much better brainstorming partner. There's a couple of different models. You have O3, O3 Pro, O1, depending on which plan you're on. But O3 is really the one that stands out to me because it not only does that slower kind of thinking, which makes it much better for problem solving, for strategy, for analysis, but it is also multimodal, meaning that your prompt doesn't just have to be a bunch of text. You could literally prompt it a chart. Like you could feed it an org chart and say, brainstorm with me on how we can improve the structure of our company. You can prompt it images, infographics, entire data files. And it is agentic in terms of it can use different tools. So in order to solve the problem that you're giving it, it could run Python. It could run calculations. It could do that web search we saw earlier. It can generate images. All of that, all in one model. So if you take even just a few things away from these 45 minutes together, like this is another one where you really will get so much more out of ChatGPT if you switch from 4.0, the standard model, to O3 whenever it is about analysis, brainstorming, strategy, and similar kind of like actions. That's where O3 really, really shines. And then finally, personalization. So I've said this before, I really think people are selling themselves short in using kind of the general out of the box AI. ChatGPT can be incredibly custom to you. And the more you customize it and the more you use it, the more it will be really hard to switch to another platform because it knows so much about you and it can be so much more tailored. So when you get a reply on a particular prompt, even if that prompt wasn't complete, because ChatGPT knows so much about you, the outputs are actually much better. So there are three ways to really personalize ChatGPT. The first one is custom instructions. Then there's memory, and then there's connectors. And that's like the last big feature I want to show you. On custom instructions, if you go into settings on any of the apps, you go into settings, you go to personalization, you will see that you can give ChatGPT your name, what you do, and what traits it should have. So giving it this context means that every single time you have a conversation with ChatGPT, it will remember how you prefer to reply. So maybe by default, it's a little bit like witty, but you want it to be acting more like like a really senior chief of staff, or you want it to be super analytical, or you want it to always really focus on removing your blind spots. You can basically set that as a system instruction so that every single time you talk to ChatGPT, it will remember to do that. The second one is the traits. So what traits should ChatGPT have? This is almost like kind of like its personality. So you can say, I want you to be strategic, fast thinking, precise, systems oriented. This is obviously mine. But by doing that, you will get a much different type of response for ChatGPT and hopefully much more valuable to you. The second part of personalizing ChatGPT is memories. So memories is really amazing. Basically, you see this sometimes when you're talking to ChatGPT and it will say memory updated. If you go into your settings and personalization, you can see a list of all the things that ChatGPT has remembered about you. And this basically allows ChatGPT again to personalize the responses based on what it knows about you. But maybe sometimes you're working on client work, for example, and it actually stored a memory that is not relevant to you normally. You can remove that memory here. Just click on the trash icon to the side there. You can remove that memory so that its memory isn't muddied and it's not remembering the wrong thing about you, right? So maybe you were doing something as like one specific assignment. You don't want it to be a persistent memory that kind of influences all the responses. So by updating these memories, you can make ChatGPT a lot more personalized. And then there's advanced memory, which basically means that only as of 2 months ago, ChatGPT starts remembering everything across all of the chats. So now ChatGPT actually remembers things that you just said in chat without storing it into that specific memory feature. And we go much deeper on that in the course, but basically it means that it has a lot more context and it can recall things like, hey, do you remember that conversation we had about topic X? Or, hey, tell me everything you know about the project we do, and then go and do this new assignment. So this really means that, again, the more you use ChatGPT, and that's why something like ChatGPT Record can be really helpful, the more you use it, the more it will understand you, and therefore the more valuable the tool will become. Very different from only tapping it here and there. And then the final one that I wanted to show you today is connectors, and then we will round up. Connectors is basically the ability to connect your ChatGPT with custom data sources so that, again, it's not just searching the general knowledge, but it's also searching your specific knowledge, right? So here you can see I've set it up to connect with my Gmail, my Google Calendar, my Google Drive, but you can also add your CRM, HubSpot, you can add Box, you can add Outlook, you can add SharePoint. And this allows you to, again, in, for example, a deep research, which we saw earlier, to also pull in all of your data so that, again, it really becomes something that is super specialized to your needs and to your particular intelligence. So therefore, you're creating content that a competitor couldn't, right? Because it's based on things that only you know or data that you only have on your drive. If you want to set up connectors, just go to settings, connectors. You see there all of the different connectors that are available to you. This will depend on your plan and your geography. You set up the platform, in this case, an HubSpot integration. And now when you're in chat, when you're in deep research, when you're in agent, it can use these connectors. You can toggle them on and off so that you actually, again, are pulling in specific data in, for example, creating a research report, or in asking it, hey, go through my email and pull out the last 5 emails from this particular sender, analyze them, give me some advice, et cetera, et cetera. So this is all to, again, to really personalize ChatGPT and get a lot more out of it. On their website, there's a deep overview of all of the connectors and how they work. So that is over 20, yes, over 20 different ChatGPT features. Now, I'm not saying you have to use all 20 every single day, but I think if you just make it a practice to tap more into really good prompting, into some of these features that are like built on top of the product, when you start tapping into agent, when you're using the reasoning model and you're pulling in your proprietary data, you will feel like you're dealing with a very different ChatGPT than you normally would. As I said, if you want to go a lot deeper, I think this is enough as an introduction, and we have like links to all of the detailed content. But if you kind of like want a step-by-step walkthrough, you just go to flexos.org/ChatGPT. You get this course for $70 off, just in case you want to dive deeper on it and make sure you really understand ChatGPT and really tap into all of these specific features. And with that, I'll stop the sharing here. And you're totally free to drop off, but I will look at the Q&A just in case there are some questions. If you had any questions that I didn't address while I was going through the content, feel free to add it into the Q&A, and then we can spend the next couple of minutes for those who want to kind of stay behind to go through that. All right. The first one is thanks for the session. Lots of great content and tips. I struggle sometimes with using ChatGPT for creating polished decks. Yeah, ChatGPT is definitely not good at slide design. So the example I showed you, it didn't really look that great. The absolute best thing, and like people who are really using AI at a more advanced level, they call this tool stacking. So it's basically the combination of different AI tools. The best way to get a really good deck is to brainstorm with ChatGPT voice mode, maybe upload some documents to it, have some specific things that you're trying to get out of ChatGPT, give your own intelligence that you already have on a particular topic, then brainstorm with ChatGPT voice mode. Hey, I'm going to give this kind of presentation. I'm trying to create this kind of deck. Really fine tune the content with ChatGPT in voice or in chat, and then take the final content and put it into a tool like Gamma AI, or you can even use Copilot for PowerPoint, and let that tool, which is specialized for slide design, let that tool do the design part. But I would really start with creating the content in ChatGPT. For image creation, second question, the output is quite good. However, sometimes it's very hard for ChatGPT to correct typo errors in images. Yes, this is unfortunately still inherent to, these are mostly language models. They now have some image capabilities, but text in images is very, very hard because of the way that image models are created. And we have a whole module on like multimodal AI and like how it exactly works. I would just say like the best practice there is going back to tool stacking, is to either brainstorm with ChatGPT what the image should be, and then go into a specialized image creator. Like, for example, Ideogram, I really like. Midjourney is still the favorite in the community. We recently polled. Or to let ChatGPT generate the image, but not include any text, and add the text in post in just a normal image tool. You can even use Canva, Ideogram does this, Photoshop, etc. But basically kind of like leave out the text part so that you can do that in a tool that's actually built to create text. So that's sort of like where we get into the limitations of ChatGPT. Okay, the next one is nowadays there are many articles around how to spot AI generated content. While we like to use AI or ChatGPT to help us get a head start in creating content, do you have any tips on how to create content that sounds more human-like in tone? So the most important thing here is that you want to make sure that, again, if you just kind of like open ChatGPT as a new, let's say like a new account, right? And you type in create a blog post about topic X, you will get, it's a generic input, right? Going back to prompting, you have a generic input, you get a very generic output, right? So you get a blog post that is basically the most obvious information about a certain topic. The best way to create really great content is to start by what you know. So what you can do, for example, you can do it in text, or you can do it in ChatGPT advanced voice mode. You can say, look, I'm thinking about writing an article about topic X. Can you, this is really the hack, can you interview me about that topic? So you basically are getting ChatGPT to ask you questions about that topic, right? So let's say it's cleaning services, right? What do you know about cleaning services? What makes one cleaning service different than another? What products do you use that your competitors don't use, right? Get ChatGPT to interview you, and you can say, interview me as a brand strategist, interview me as a writer at Forbes, interview me as, right? You can define the character, that's the C in Codu. So basically then it pulls the data out of you. You can combine that with data that you have, right, through either connector or manual upload. And then you can get it to write some content. I would, again, really try either the 4.1 model if it's more kind of SEO strategic content, or the 4.5 model if it's more creative content, and then get it to write. And when you're doing it through those steps, you're getting something that's almost like as if you've written it, but it's written by AI. That's how you get out of the AI generated content, because again, it's based on yours. Then you can do things like creating a GPT, so a custom GPT that's trained on your voice. So you basically give it 20 of your articles and say, my next article, write it in this way. You could create a ChatGPT project where you do the same thing, but it's consistent and all the, again, additions are linked to each other, and it can basically build on that. So tons of ways, basically almost everything we went through, there are all kinds of hints kind of sprinkled throughout on how to create AI generated content that doesn't feel AI generated. Okay, James is asking, I want to customize it for others by putting in my data and have others use the same AI with my data. So that's what you can do with I don't know when this question was asked. That's what you could do with a GPT. Projects are personal to you, but GPTs can be shared depending on your plan. You could create a GPT that only you can access. You can create a GPT that only your team or your company can access, or specific people, or you can create a GPT that's publicly accessible. You can even publish it to the official GPT store, like the iPhone App Store. And then it would have your data inside. So you can do that through a GPT. Anonymous question, can ChatGPT combine a few images into one with part of each image? Yes, it can, but it's not going to be fantastic. And I would really then say, okay, then you're probably hitting the limitations of what a generic AI tool can do. And I would really look into something like Midjourney, or maybe, again, Ideogram or something like that, that are really like specifically built for creating images. And they typically do also a better job at all of the advanced features you would want to have, like overlaying text or creating image consistency, right? You have a certain character you wouldn't want to come back in every image. That's just not something that ChatGPT is really built for. Okay, Paramdeep, 3 more questions. Even though one uses ChatGPT a lot, this session was a real eye-opener. How does one improve benchmarking studies across products, specifically ones being built by startups? And how does one reduce the fact that someone can trace it to AI-supported research? So I think we can speak on this one-on-one. I think generally, like, there's this sort of idea of like, how do you separate between, again, the kind of work that everyone gets out of ChatGPT and the work that you can generate by following all of these like hacks and tips and features. And then the other part of that is too, is like, I think we're moving towards a society where it's going to be the obvious thing that you are using AI to generate research. And so I don't think it's necessarily like a curse word or a bad thing to be using AI. But again, by layering your own data, by really getting AI to interrogate you, to unlock all of the information that's already in your brain, you can get something that's a lot more personal. So I hope that answered it. If not, just reach out one-on-one and we can go through it. Will, I struggle with differentiating between customized GPT and projects. Both have a limit of uploading 20 documents. Yeah, so this is a really interesting question. And sometimes I wonder why ChatGPT or OpenAI is even still having this kind of differentiation between the two products. Basically, I would say, like, right now, the main difference is that custom GPTs can be made public. So meaning you can create one GPT. Let's say you create a copywriter GPT or an HR FAQ GPT, and you can make that available to your team or to your company. That is something you cannot do with projects. Projects are a little bit more powerful, but they're only for yourself. So you can only use them in your own account and you cannot share them out. So I would say that's kind of like the main difference right now. And where I would say, here's where you would use a GPT versus here's where you would use a project. Okay, Rajesh, can one enroll for the 7-day program with a free ChatGPT plan? I'm assuming it will have exercises. Yeah, almost everything in ChatGPT you can do with the free plan. There may be some things like the advanced models you cannot access. There will be certain features that you cannot access. Actually, the first lesson is going through all of the plans and understanding what's possible, what's not possible on the free plan, the pro plan, the plus plan, the teams plan, the enterprise plan. But yeah, most things, again, you can get even on the free plan. Albert is asking, is all this input available in another language like Italian and French, so I can share with my students? If you mean like the inputs that you would give to ChatGPT, yeah, ChatGPT is language agnostic, so it will just reply in any language that you speak to it, and it can switch between them. But, and again, this it would be too detailed to go into now. If you want really good quality information, you have to think about the language in which the source material, meaning the training material, was originated. So if the training material, meaning, let's say, information about recipes, right? If most of those recipes were written in English, you're going to get better results when you prompt ChatGPT in English than if you were to prompt it in Italian, right? If there's a specific regional dish, then maybe actually prompting in Italian will yield a better result. I hope that answers the question. William, when I work with ChatGPT and build on it, it keeps forgetting along the way. So if you have the plus version or above, it should remember most of the things that you're saying to ChatGPT as long as you're paying for it. So if you have that version and it still forgets something, then maybe look into creating either custom knowledge libraries, look into something like, again, building GPTs, look into your custom instructions, maybe find some hacks to make sure it remembers certain things. Interesting. Got more questions, but I do have to round up in a couple of minutes. Otherwise, I'll take them offline. Can you speak? Okay, very important one. Can you speak to the security of your personal information when you say connect to your email? Deeply look into this. Generally, this is the same when you let any application sign into your Gmail to do something with it. The data goes to OpenAI. Now, they say that they don't store it on their servers. They say that no one will see it. I mean, there's always a risk, right? Anytime you give anyone access to anything or any platform, there's always a risk. Now, sometimes we start to feel a bit too scared with AI, and then at the same time are very lax with, let's say, our password or things like this. But yeah, really look into it and really think very carefully about what data you expose to OpenAI and what data you have. Mike is saying show 49, but not 29. It should be 29. If not, we will fix it because again, we want to make it easy for people to buy. So if it's not now, then right after the session, we will make sure that we discount it to 29 as promised. And then can ChatGPT be incorporated into a website to act as an agent? So no, the underlying technology can definitely be incorporated into a website. There's tons of platforms that do that. Chatbase is one of them. It can be done in things like HubSpot or Intercom, but ChatGPT cannot be shown to the outside world. That's the short answer. There are some things you can do custom in a platform like Make or Zapier, but that would get a little bit more advanced than what we have time for today. Rajesh says, thanks. And then Siva is asking for recommendations, web links, or YouTube links on prompting for notes creation or code creation. Okay, I will take that one offline. Okay, very good. Well, thanks everyone for joining today. We'll make sure to fix the price issue if that persists for other people as well. Feel free to take that course, go through all of the details, and then obviously you can always reply and ask any follow-up questions. What I hope for everyone is that, again, this amazing technology, there's so much possible with ChatGPT to really reduce the amount of time that you're spending on work, especially kind of pesky, repetitive digital work. So please take advantage of as much as possible. And that's kind of like the overall mission here, is just to make sure that you really get as much out of it as possible. All right, thanks everyone. And we'll see some of you on Thursday for our lesson on AI and video generation, and otherwise somewhere online. All right, thanks everyone. Have a great day.